What kinds of creative pressures do you experience, and are any of them, you think, unique to you, or alternatively to the many genres that you explore?
I think the biggest pressure on anybody in the creative industries is the money to the creativity. Getting the money to do the things you want to do creatively, whether you're a filmmaker, whether you're a musician, whether you're an artist, that's the biggest hurdle for anyone. And then the time it takes to do the admin, to try and get the money, to do the thing that you want to do, which is not doing the emails, but actually being at the instrument. So it ends up that this becomes luxury and the rest becomes... So in a way, I'm almost an administrator. I'd say that's my other job. I could definitely be a good administrator because I do probably most of my day administration and bits of my day doing the music.
I think sometimes it's about the balance of the work you can manage, and it's about maybe doing one thing at one time and getting that done thoroughly, as opposed to trying to do two things at once.
I suppose the pressures are time, working to... It's that combination, finding that balance of producing the quality that you want in a short space of time, very concentrated period of time. And I think, unfortunately, I think that's just that's part and parcel of the whole creative business. Everybody would love to have more time. I suppose it just speaks to the demands that we all put on ourselves.
I suppose it's time management and being disciplined, and maybe if something's not going very well on a particular day, maybe it's shutting up shop and going on to something else.
Is that what you tend to do then in those situations where you sort of feel like, as you say, something isn't quite working? Is that your go-to strategy, is to shut up shop for the day?
I might shut up shop for, I think it depends how bad it is, how bad the block is. It might be shutting up shop for part of a day and maybe coming back later to see if anything improves. If not, because you can have days where nothing comes together. Do you know what I'm saying?
The thing that I rely on and have relied on for a long time is when I was at Guildhall and at music college, I spent hours with the piano just exploring and doing all those things. And those ideas, that time was invaluable, because that's the thing later that you don't have. You don't have time, you're having to grab time, grab moments to be creative.
I always think often those days where you're not very productive necessarily, they're often actually the best days, when you sort of look back on the development of a particular piece, that day where you've really not achieved very much. It's almost, I don't know, sometimes for me anyway, it feels like it's sort of necessary. Like it's necessary sometimes to put the work in, even if there's not much that sort of comes out of that, because at some point, I don't know, I'll be in the kitchen or walking around and whatever the problem was, it's just suddenly solved.
I think you're right. I think in the sense that the fact that something hasn't gone very well in a particular day, it can intensify your thinking processes to problem solve. So the next time you come to sit down to look at this challenge, you've probably thought of several strategies for moving forward. And that can sometimes help you to work much more quickly the next time you come back to the problem that's not been solved.
I think teaching composition is sort of very useful in this regard, because it often allows you to see from a distance your own sort of compositional errors. In that I think it's very easy for creatives to succumb to unconscious, unchallenged presumptions during the creative process. In the sense that we're often concerned with the right way to go about creating a piece of music. The idea that there is a right way. the idea that you need to have a sort of fully fleshed out concept and have a sort of innate understanding of what the piece is about before you begin putting pen to paper. And you know, the reality is very often a concept will emerge suddenly out of getting your hands dirty with sound, and over time you gradually begin to understand you know, what the idea is through the act of composing, you know, or it becomes sort of more and more apparent how that original vague idea you know, relates to the music that you're making. And so I think the danger is, if you've sort of settled on a starting concept, you know, I want to write a piece about X, you know, you still have to write the piece. And so the danger is, as you start to compose, you sort of end up writing what you really want to write, which might be, you know, very different from the initial idea. But because you've invested so much time in preparing, there's a sort of a reluctance to kind of abandon it. And so sometimes I think the biggest sort of hindrance to producing the goods is this idea of pre-composition. And so I spend less and less time on it. You know, because that preparation is often sort of more useful midway through a piece than it is at the start.
The biggest demand that I put on myself is wanting to feel as if I completely grasp what I'm writing. But in fact, the sort of the more integral part of writing is that you don't know what you're going to produce. And it's just being able to sit comfortably with that unknowing, and knowing that there is time looking at you saying, oh, come in for you.
I think it was Benjamin Britten that said that composing's like driving up to a house where it's foggy, and the closer you get, the more you see of it. So it's a similar sort of process in the sense that the more you work with a piece, the clearer the path that you need to take with the piece becomes. So yeah, the beginning is always the most daunting, and then as you sort of go along, you can sort of breathe and relax a bit.
Do you ever experience sort of guilt in relation to your productivity as an artist? And if so, how does that manifest?
Yes. Yes, I do experience guilt in relation to productivity, because I always think that I should have produced more, more, better, and, you know, all those different sort of things. But as to how it manifests, it's more sort of in the head more than anything else. You know, there's sort of questions and nagging that arises from time to time. But once I'm writing really.
Probably not, is the short answer. Guilt in the sense of what?
Guilt in what way? Not enough works, too much works, or you mean not producing enough, presumably?
I don't know how the other would manifest, that you would be guilty that you're producing too much.
Yeah, that's why I was trying to work that out, yeah. I don't know. Well, that's okay. I don't feel guilty that I've been producing too much. Maybe Prince or someone that keeps producing songs all the time.
Well, that could be anything. I mean, some people do experience guilt in relation to the rate of productivity not being fast enough.
No. I think, you can only work as fast as you can. I mean, I write quite relatively quickly anyway.
Definitely it'd be nice if I could have been producing more. Just, as I said, the balance between raising money to do works and put things on and all of that, rather than the doing. Generally, I'm quite quick when it comes, well, I wouldn't say that, I'd say generally I've had to be quite quick. Sometimes miraculously quick, but due to circumstances.
On the odd occasion, I'll sort of think I should be doing something different, you know, a different type of composition, and But you know, yeah, I'm just aware with myself that it's sort of inevitable. You know, the grass might always look greener on the other side. So, but I don't pay too much attention to it. I get more sort of wrapped up in what's going on in the moment and what is sort of grabbing my attention as a compositional project at the time.
What I generally do as a fail-safe for myself is I've been realistic with myself, knowing the circumstances. So I usually have this thing of saying, each year I must have done something that I consider worthwhile. That can either be a piece or a recording or something of that nature that I go, this year was about this. So I can account for that year in my life. That became very important early on for me and all through, from just people that inspire me, things they said about accountability of one's life creatively. So I've always tried to do that, and that helps, because I wouldn't say I've done loads of things, but I always make sure I've done something in that creative field mostly.
Obviously you have to pre-plan and try and, usually I'm working towards a deadline, but at the same time, if you need a bit more time, then that's the way it is. If you don't, then great. But you need to, guilt in that sense is not something I'm concerned about.
When I did a poster for Orchestra Live, where I was working with a lot of orchestras between 1999 and 2001. During that period, I was doing like 6 orchestral works a year. So I know I'm capable of doing that. But I haven't done that since because of circumstances, really. But I know I could be that productive so that's, if you say guilt, I feel guilty that I'm not able to create at that consistency. But I don't blame myself, because it's just not been possible. So guilt, I wish I could be that productive is more the way I would put it.
Do you ever get stuck on a piece? And when was the last time this happened? And how did you get unstuck?
I think you just have to be unstuck. You just have to force yourself not to think about it. And the best way to do that sometimes is to start a new piece where you can maybe address the issues that you had with a piece that you weren't entirely happy with. Or if you have time, you can always revisit. It's always good to go back onto a piece and see what you can do to improve it. But then I think the sort of weird thing is that if you have a single recording of a piece, then you're stuck with that version for quite some time. So even if you do correct it, it's difficult not to relate back to that recording until you have a new reference point. I try not to do it too. I mean, it's always nice to revise, and you think, oh my God, I could really make this amazing if I did it like this, but I don't think it's healthy to sort of get too fixated because it stunts your growth and sort of allowing you to think about the next things that you might be doing. I mean, there were a few works in my time where I kept on revisiting, kept on reworking, but you have to let go and then fix those issues in the next piece that you write.
Well, the thing is, because I keep going back over what I've done, if something isn't working, I stop it and fix it until it's working, until it's, you know, it's whole, until it's proper. So no, I don't really let it slide.
Yeah, that can happen. That's usually more to do with, not technicalities, but it's usually more to do with structural things. You want to come out nice, you'll go in. Those are kind of more the inspiration is where you get the flow, you know, the arc, the flow, the narrative. Then, of course, there's the bit that always takes longer, which is the nitty-gritty. It's like, okay, now I need, and that's the bit that's the composer bit, because you're really shaping what you've had, moulding it more than shaping it. And that's where you can get stuck because you're like, oh no, but that needs to fit that, and that's, it can happen. But I think sometimes I go to sleep on it, wake up, and I have to answer. Those are sometimes solutions, just to move away, and it comes out. I think hammering it is the worst thing. That's the same in life, the same with anything. I think when you've got a technical problem as well, you know, hammer the same thing, just the wrong approach. It's like if there's a technical difficulty, I think Alfie was one that showed me that. She used to say, make the technical problem even harder. So if there's a thing, you know, a technical thing, do it double or do something even harder than the thing you have to do, and change it around, do it backwards, do it upside down, do all this gymnastics with it, so it's creatively changing. And then when you come back to the original thing that gave you a headache, it will suddenly be a lot simpler. It's all kind of psychological game playing for yourself. Those things I think really help, saving time rather than going round and round and round. The same problem is still a problem. It's being clever or inventive with problems.
Have you ever abandoned an idea completely, and if so, what do you think went wrong?
I think when I'm writing, or if I have an idea, I try not to write it down. And if a few days pass and the idea comes back to me, then there's something in it that is obviously on my mind. If I forget it, then I sort of leave it to, you know, I don't want to get all cosmic, but it wasn't meant to be. So recently I came up with an idea, and it is actually stuck in my head. So I think I'm going to explore it, and sort of it's past that sort of test of it's worth exploring further now. So yeah.
No, I don't think you'd. If I abandon an idea completely, it's probably because it's a very bad idea. And usually I identify that quite quickly. Hopefully. I don't be wasting. I haven't got that much time to waste time on a bad idea. So we can all have bad ideas, but the trick is don't waste time on it.
I'll abandon things when it's, you know, if it starts off as a project that is supposed to sort of have collaborators, and you know, maybe it's dependent on support or whatever, and it turns out that that project isn't going to happen, so you abandon that. But in terms of pieces, there are some that I've put aside simply because I haven't had the time to continue with them, but they're never abandoned, and I've deliberately now sort of tried to put aside some time for myself to go back to those pieces that I had started that are kind of haunting me and kind of going, it's time to work on me. I'll see what happens to them. I have no idea.
No, once I've started a project and it's going, you just have to find solutions to make that thing, you know, the idea, if it's to make it work. It's like saying, I don't know how that's possible. If it's part of life and part of what you're about, you make things work. I guess that's to do with philosophy, but you make things work. You can't abandon life, well you can, but it's the same thing. You try and make the thing be the best it can be.
Have you ever experienced a period of creative impotence, and if so, what happened? How often? How did you ameliorate that situation?
No. No, I think it's more to do with this, well, it's not a struggle per se, but it's more to do with the idea that you want to create something that will stand, that you'll be happy with in years to come. So I think however you approach that, whether that does then become a struggle, if it manifests itself in that sense. But for me anyway, there comes a point as a composer where more or less you're happy with what you're doing, or you're happy with the place you're at. If not, then obviously you'll change, but I think it's important not to always hark back, in the sense that it can be very detrimental to your creative process if you're sort of stuck in the mud and you dwell on, oh my god, that bit didn't go the way I wanted it to, or I'm not happy. Sure, you know, people aren't happy with performances or necessarily sections within music, or you know, people might even not be happy with certain works, and sort of take them out of their repertoire and sort of consign them to the shelves of their libraries. But it's important to move forward, otherwise it's you sort of you get stuck in a limbo, and it's not good for your well-being mentally or artistically.
Yes and no. I mean, I think what I said about the process for me is particular. If I write music from me directly, it's not very good because it's generic and pointless. I'm just being honest now. The only music that has a point for me is when I'm able to access that higher vibration, and that's the music that comes through me. So I don't make any claim to the music that I put out, yeah, it's mine, it comes through me, but what I mean is that I access that music. I try to be true to that music that comes through me, but I'm not the source for that music, and that's key for me. That acknowledgement is key. I always acknowledge that. So I always acknowledge that it's not me, I'm not the source of the music. I receive the music. And that's what gives the music its power. And if it's not, it's probably my fault for not translating it properly.
So far, I have to say that I'm fortunate in that I haven't really felt that impotence. There have been moments where I've felt blocked on something, and that's always a moment of panic that can last, anything can last days, weeks, where I will literally just sit physically at the instrument. I'll write at the piano, and so I'll sit at the instrument and knock a million things, you know, try and knock out things to try and produce some sort of results, and inevitably fail. I suppose with time what I've learned to do is just to go with it, and know that eventually something that is satisfactory and something that feels an integral part of what I've started working with eventually appears. Yeah.
The best music I've ever heard in my life is in dream state, and it's very annoying because I hear complete songs, I hear complete pieces, perfect pieces, and then I can't access them when I wake up. I try to get bits and then I just got some kind of some motif that doesn't make any sense. I tried many things. I used to leave things by the bed, like a pen and pencil. I used to leave a phone, or not a phone back in the day, it was other devices like mini disc or whatever it was, to try and capture the things from sleep state to real state. I even tried to do in dream state, remembering, like you've got a melody, and I'll sing the melody through that dream, through all the dreams, to try and keep it for when you wake.
So assuming that you can't do that, I mean, it's a sort of ineffective strategy for a professional musician.
Yeah, no, but I'm joking. But all these things are really about source. It's just about knowing where things come from. When I improvise, when I'm at the piano playing or trying to explore ideas, I'm trying to access that spirit. I know the spirit of what I'm trying to access, and then you get to that place, you go, and then you get an idea of that thing, and you put that down, and then composition for me is just really a culmination of those ideas that have come through in an improvisatory state. So I remember we used to call it spontaneous. We used to call it improvisation, spontaneous composition rather than improvisation, because it's misleading. Spontaneous composition it's composition, but it's just in the moment. That's the only difference. Improvisation, they had that too, it was like you make it up as you go along. No, there's no making it up as you go along. It has its... How do I know that John Coltrane's solo is different from the next saxophone player? They're improvising. So how do I know one player from another? Because they're making sense. They have structures, they have melodic motifs, they have ideas, they have their own particular way of doing phrases, musical vocabulary. So it's not making up as you go along, it is particular. It's composition, but in the moment.
So is spontaneous composition the method that you adopt for normally starting a piece?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, often. To try and access the idea and to be in the right frame of mind to access that music. I remember when I was composing heavily, it was here, I used to be in that back room, and this is the days that I remember that I used to like, was getting up. I would get like a yogurt drink, which was just, like yogurt and thing, mix it like a smoothie thing, go down, start the music, and I'd start, say 9 or whatever in the morning, and then about 5 minutes later I turn round and it's dark. I was like, wow, how did that happen? And it'd be hours later, but when you're in that musical state, the time vanishes. The time goes like, you're in a different time state, really. You're in a different, you have a different concept of time when you go into that musical mode or creative mode. I literally think you see time differently.